So what's in your refrigerator? Here at Salthaven Wildlife, if you open our fridge in the winter, you are likely to find a bat or two. Hi, I'm Kathy Mueller, host of Wild About Wildlife, and in this episode, we focus on helping bats survive our harsh Canadian winters, and yes, that does involve keeping bats in a fridge. Here to help explain that and more are Natalia Slipak, clinic manager for Salthaven West in Regina, Saskatchewan, and Megan Clark, a member of Salthaven's Bat Squad in Ontario. Thank you both for joining me today. So, looking at the bats that we get in Ontario and Saskatchewan, they just don't really seem fit for purpose for our winters. They don't seem to have that layer of protection to help them deal with the harsh temperatures that we see in both provinces. So, how in fact do they survive our cold winters?
Out here in Ontario, we have two types of species of bats, the foliage-dwelling bats and the crevice-dwelling bats. And the difference between the two are the crevice-dwelling bats will typically hibernate over the winter, much like a bear would over the winter as well. And then our foliage dwelling bats are the ones that would migrate south, and they'll often go to the southern states and even as far as Mexico.
And Nat?
Yeah, so here in Saskatchewan, we have about eight different species of bats. At Salthaven West, we mostly take big brown bats, and we occasionally get hoary bats or little brown bats, which are considered endangered right now, and silver-haired bats as well. So big brown bats, which is the most common one we get at the clinic, their name indicates they may be very big, but they're actually not. They're little, but they're very, very strong. They hibernate and they roost together, so they keep each other warm. And they hibernate, actually. They don't migrate. So they do find crevices and caves and eroded areas of rock to hang from. And they go to sleep and they go through this very, very harsh winter we have here. So they are little, but they are extremely resilient.
All right, and then you've in Saskatchewan, you've started this program now, an artificial torpor program. First of all, am I saying that correctly? I find that a difficult word to say. And can you describe that a little bit? But first, like, what is torpor?
So torpor is basically kind of like a deep sleep state that a lot of animals actually go through in the wild. So basically, all their metabolic rates go down. They go from about 250 beats per minute from their heart to about 10 approximately. So what we do is we replicate artificially the environment that they would be going through outside if they were in the wild. So we have a temperature and humidity controlled hibernacula where we keep them. And then we decrease the temperature to the point that we want it in order to induce that torpor or deep sleep.
And why did you start doing that and mimicking what happens out in the wild?
Um, the main point was to we always try to keep our animals, whether that is with a diet or with an environment or with the enrichment, the closest we can to their natural environment and the natural resources they would find out there. So I started thinking about it, one, because of that, keeping them awake throughout the 7 or 8 months we have them in care it just felt against what they would be doing. So I basically got in contact with the University of Regina, with their Department of Biology and Zoology, and Dr. Mark Brigham and his team of biologists were absolutely amazing. And I basically called them and I said, listen, we get a lot of bats. We want to do something different. I know you guys have a lot of knowledge. And I come with my notepad and ask you all the dumbest questions? And they were super receptive and they said, there is no dumb questions. Please come in. So we had a meeting that it was so good. Like it opened my eyes to a lot of their biology, physiology, their natural history, and things that you think you know can expand so much when you're talking to a bat biologist. So I basically asked all my questions and then ended up with a lot of answers, but then another huge new list of new questions, right? So yeah, we did our best to set up a hibernacula with the resources we had, and basically it was a trial, right? So we'll see how this goes. We'll see how they do. I decided to take them out every month to check on their health, weight them, um, and see how they're doing overall. And it started being very, very positive. So we take them out every month, we weigh each of them, we check their health, we feed them, we give them water, we make a soft food mix at the clinic. It's a recipe that comes from the bat world that is in the US. And it has enzymes and vitamins and minerals and all kinds of cool stuff to help their health. And yeah, if they're healthy and in good weight, they go back the next morning and for another month or 15 days. This year I'm doing it every 15 days so I can compare my data from this year against last year's.
And how many years have you now been using and running this program?
This is the second year. So we started last year fall, and then this is the second year. So it'll be very, very interesting to see what differences we get. And last year we had many, many more bats at this point. This year I don't have so many. So we'll still we're still very early in the winter, so we may. But yeah, I am looking forward to collecting all the data from this season and comparing it against last year's.
And you talked about how one question leads to another, and that's exactly why you were talking. All these questions were popping up in my head. So, you mentioned the clinical name of the environment that you're putting the bats into, but essentially it is a refrigerator, right?
Yes, you're right.
Okay. And do the bats need to be in any particular kind of state when you put them into the refrigerator, other than being a good healthy weight and in good overall health condition? You just put them in the fridge and let them be? Like, what happens when they go into the fridge? And can you see them without having to open up the door?
So regarding temperature, so last year we had a very small donated refrigerator that did not have an new fridges come with controlled things, and they're like way better. We had a pretty old one, a smaller one. So in order to control the humidity, I had to add different plastic containers with water. And then I did this trial for about 2.5 weeks with uh, a thing that measured the humidity and whatnot until I got it to the point that I wanted consistently. And same with humidity. It was a little roller to go from 1 to 7, so you didn't really know what that meant. Excuse me, in terms of temperature. So I had to be moving that back and forth until I got to the temperature I wanted. And then this year, we reached out to a local company, Coast Appliances. They were absolutely wonderful. I called them out of the blue and I said, "Hi, I am at Salthaven. We have this program with bats hibernating, that we keep all winter, and we've been using this old fridge, and you have fridges. So I am I'm looking for this and that." And actually, they were so mind blown, and they're like, "You put what in fridges?" So it was quite interesting to kind of like reach an area of the community that maybe doesn't hear about bats in hibernation. So uh, they were wonderful. They were very interested. They asked so many good questions, and they ended up donating a brand new fridge with temperature and humidity control. So that has made my life so much easier. to be able to get to the exact temperature and humidity that I wanted them to be. So basically, they are in soft-sided cages, and I provide different hideouts and caves, and I do leave some dishes with water in case they do wake up and they start walking around, so they have access to water. The idea is that they don't wake up, but if they do, at least they have access to that. Yeah, and every 15 days, as I said, I take them out. So the first time I did it, it was very nerve-wracking. Honestly, I didn't know if I was going to go in and find all my bats were deceased. So it was it's been a crazy road. It's been absolutely mind blowing to do this type um, of program at the clinic. So I am very pleased. I just had my bat day, as I call them, yesterday. So I took them out and I did all the process, and they were very active, very healthy. So yeah, it's still a while to go.
And when you do take them out, does it take them a while to, they have to warm up and wake up? And what's that process like? Is it kind of like somebody coming out of, if they've been under sedation almost, something like that? Or
Yeah, so sorry, I forgot to answer the other part of your question, which was when they go in, basically, when you open a fridge, there's a lot of the cold that comes out. So it takes the fridge a while to go back to the the temperature you want it to be. So that process helps them not to go from a regular clinic temperature to 2 degrees or 3 degrees. So it slowly goes down. So that helps. And we don't keep them under any type of heating source, and we don't have any heating pads or anything around them.
my next question was going to be about the success rate, and from last year, you opened up the fridge at the end of the season, and were all your bats still doing well?
Yeah, so every month I opened it and they were doing good. Some of them lost weight, so I had to keep them outside um, to make them gain weight and get ready for going back into torpor. So some of them consistently stayed in torpor and then came out, were fed, weighed, they were great. They went back to torpor, and others went into torpor, came out, they lost more weight than I liked, so I kept them out. And then they skipped one torpor, and then they went back in. There was a little bit of everything. It was super interesting by the end of the season to see how different. And then we have a lot of eye-opening information. One of them being, I did confirm that bats that are housed together during torpor do much better than those that are housed uh, alone. So due to our ministry regulations, we can't put bats from different roosts together. So I could only house the ones that came together. So I got a roost of 12. So those 12 were housed together throughout the program, and they did so much better in health and weight in energy, in appetite. Everything was much better. And the success was amazing compared to other years that we had kept the bats outside throughout the winter months. It was a huge difference. I had about 37 throughout the winter, the 7 or 8 months, 35 actually. And we released 33 of them. So that was great. It wasn't 100%, but sometimes things are that way. So I am very, very happy with the results, and I'm hoping this year is looking like it will be the same. I'm basing the program on them and what they need and what I feel they are reacting better to. So that's all part of this, and it's learning and it's making things, giving them a better chance to go through this hibernation program, um, in the best way possible, so they can come out ready and strong, and they can go eventually to our outdoor flight pens, get strong prior to release. So it's been a long road, and I think I haven't gotten where I want to go, but we're working hard on it. And it depends a lot on the manpower you have here at Salthaven West. um, we don't have a lot of our volunteers with rabies vaccine, so basically it was falling onto us, the 3 or 4 people, right? So we had to feed, clean, medicate about 35 bats every single day, and plus the rest of the clinic, right? So it was uh, it was hard. So this not only helps the bats, but it also brought a sense of relief um, for our staff and volunteers.
Megan, let's jump over to the Salthaven Bat Squad in Ontario, and you are going to be adopting this program for this winter. Is it already underway? And tell us what you're seeing.
Yeah, it is underway. We did start last season during the middle of the spring. We did kind of a trial period with 6 or 7 bats, and after realizing it was working so well, we fully adopted it this season. We've so far done we do follow what Salthaven West is doing with some of our own modifications, but we do weigh them once a month, and so they've had 2 weigh-ins, and we've only had to remove 1 bat due to some weight loss. He's not at the conditions that we would like to see him for torpor. So far, it's going really well. The bats are completely sleeping when they're in the fridge. The modifications that we've made are not that many. We were able to purchase a fridge brand new from the get-go. It's a fridge that doesn't have a freezer, so we're not ever worried that it's going to freeze, and it is temperature controlled. So we have 3 selections that we can choose from. But it's a fridge that's really effective at removing humidity. And so we did some research, and we looked around, and we did a lot of trial and error, and we found a reptile fogger, which is a machine that people who own reptiles would often place in an aquarium-like setting to help humidify a setting for a reptile. And so we thought we'd try this in the fridge, and it's working perfectly. So that's maybe one modification we've made, but otherwise we've really adopted pretty much what Salthaven's doing. We do offer our bats food in their cage, in their fridge, because we did notice that they are active, even though they should be sleeping. Once in a while they are waking up, and when they wake up they do come down looking for that water, and they have the opportunity to have a little snack. The reason we're choosing to do this, similar to Salthaven West, is we'd like to mimic the natural environment and the natural behavior of the bat. And as well, we don't have a lot of staff, and we were finding with 30 plus bats that it was a lot of work for 4 or 5 people. And our other concern was that we were having a lot of pups born in care earlier in the spring than when they would typically be born in June. And so then we were finding that we had to support the mom, help her raise her pups. And then by the time the pups were, ready to fly and ready to, be an adult, the weather still hadn't become nice enough for them. So we also believe that by torporing the bats, this will prevent any pups from being born in care. And then the moms can do what they do best and raise their own babies.
Right, because if I'm not mistaken, the female bats, they're actually pregnant over the course of the winter, but it's kind of a dormant pregnancy. I don't know if that's correct term or not, but they're basically pregnant, but nothing happens until that warmer weather starts showing up.
Yeah, pretty much. They do mate in the fall, and then they store the semen in their system, and then once they wake up from their torpor in the spring and everything's favorable for them, weather, food's plenty, they have a maternity roost, then that pregnancy continues. In the easiest way to say it, it continues. And so when we were receiving female bats in January, they've been in a torpor-like state for 2 or 3 months. They've woken up. We're giving them food. We're giving them water. It's a warm and safe environment. They've got some friends. And so the pregnancy would just begin, and we would find ourselves having pups born in March and April. And that was just, it's not good for the pups and it's not good for the mom. It's better that they do that out in the wild. When we were having bats awake for the whole entire season, if we had 30 bats and only 10 of them knew how to eat by themselves, that was a lot of labor intensive work. Feeding a bat for 20 or 30 minutes, depending on how long it takes to eat, was taking up a lot of our time. And so we found that having them in torpor, we're saving on resources, both, staffing and financially, because we're not spending a lot of money on food or medications. If they, when they're awake, sometimes they run into some concerns with swollen joints that often we can't figure out what's going on. And so we found now that having them in torpor, because we're mimicking their natural state, some of these ailments that they would come down with during their awake period are no longer happening.
That's wonderful. Now, if we talk in general about the bat species in Ontario, how's it doing? Is it thriving? Are there some bats that are endangered or at risk?
Yes, we have 8 species in Ontario, and just the big brown bat is doing well. The rest of them, for Ontario specifically, are considered endangered. We've got the little brown, the eastern red, hoary bat, tricolor, the silver hair, big brown, and the eastern smallfoot, as well as the northern myotis. And so all the other bats that I've listed, other than the big brown, are endangered here in Ontario. So that's to say that there's some improvement here that we can do, and why it's so vital that we're able to help the bats and contribute to their conservation.
Right, and we'll get to the importance that the important role that bats play in our environment in a couple of minutes. But I also wanted to ask the same sort of question to Nat about the bat species in Saskatchewan, and are they facing the same kind of endangered situation that they are in Ontario?
It's similar. Yes, we do have two of the species that are endangered, and then we have two other species that are being considered to change in the Species at Risk Act to endangered.
I'm speaking with Natalia Slipak, the clinic manager for Salthaven West, and that's in Regina, Saskatchewan, and Megan Clark, a member of the Salthaven Bat Squad in Ontario. And what are the main predators, or the main, I guess the main predators? What are the main dangers that bats face that would have them in this endangered category?
I think there's different factors. There's climate factors. We as humans, we keep growing. Construction keeps taking their areas down. We get a lot of bats that are caught by cats or caught by dogs. So there's a lot of nuisance removals, behavioral stranding. So there is also white nose syndrome, which is a fungal disease that has decimated a lot of bat hibernacula. So there is a lot of factors affecting bats, and the capacity for them to keep existing and doing what they're doing. So it's up to us humans to kind of step up and do the best we can to protect them.
Megan, what's the value of having bats in our society, and what would be the impact if the bats disappeared?
Oh gosh, here in Canada, bats are mainly responsible for taking care of our crops. At nighttime, they're hunting, they're out there, they're collecting and eating a lot of bugs that would typically damage our crops. And so they're really saving our financial system, and as that we don't have to spend as much on pesticides on our crops, but also on a health level, because it's nice to be able to have crops out there that don't need as much pesticides. And so the importance of bats here in Canada are really that they are working with humans in a way that we are unaware of, but hunting at nighttime and protecting our crops
Are the main things. Yeah, and how much would like how many insects does a typical bat consume on a typical night?
Oh, thousands of bugs each night. I mean, if we just put it down to only if they only ate mosquitoes, they can eat upwards of, 1,000 mosquitoes per hour. They're just miraculous little animals. I think a lot of people don't realize the value of when they're sitting out in their backyard and they think, wow, we don't have a lot of mosquitoes. And, you can thank the bats for that. They're very active little hunters. They typically hunt just after the sun goes down and then again just before the sun comes up. But it doesn't mean that they're not out there during the middle of the night hunting as well. So they're quite active over the nighttime hunting.
We talked about this in a previous episode that we did on bats, and that they tend to get a bad rap. And I think, we touched on the whole Hollywood thing and, Dracula and blood sucking bats and all that kind of thing. And then just the erratic nature of how they fly, right? You get one inside of your house and just people get scared, they get freaked out because of the way that they navigate that space. So Nat, are bats dangerous, the ones that we see in Ontario and Saskatchewan?
We don't have bats that eat blood here. So first, starting with that, mostly we have insectivorous bats. So they feed on insects. They ecolocate. So think about how cool it is that they move around based on how sound bounces back from objects. That's how they move, basically. So if you think about it, they are producing sound and then moving based on what that bounce gives them. So if you put an animal that does this in a small area like a house, of course it's going to look erratic. Of course it's going to look weird. It's going to look like they don't know what they're doing. It's crazy. It's not. They're trying to get out. They don't want to be there. And I know, as you mentioned, Hollywood, and there's a lot of stigmas that have been put on bats. You know how terrible, and they want to get in your hair, and they will bite you. Yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions, I believe, out there about bats, and this all comes down to education and reaching out to our community and showing them and explaining how wonderful they are. Bats in the world pollinate, they disperse seed, they eat a lot of pests. So the importance of bats and the role they play in our ecosystem is not to be, you can't ignore how wonderful they are and how important and how interconnected we are, all of us. It doesn't matter the species.
You mentioned earlier that you need rabies vaccines to be able to work with the bats, so they are carriers of disease.
As all wildlife, there are zoonotic diseases that we want to look for. Bats, as well as as well as skunks and foxes and raccoons, are rabies vector species. They're not the only one. So even though it's rare that we get a rabbit bat, it's a possibility. So all our volunteers and staff need to have a rabies vaccine in order to handle and work with bats or any other rabies vector species.
So if the average person comes across a bat, one who's injured now in the winter, and they want to bring it to you, is it safe for the average person to actually come in contact with that bat?
We always recommend never to touch a bat barehanded, or a fox or a raccoon. So we do, when we get the public to call us, we explain that, and we ask them not to touch them. And that's not only for our community's safety, but for the safety of the bat as well. If someone gets bitten or scratched, we have to report it to public health, and public health may or may not decide that they want to test this bat for rabies, and the only way to doing that is having to humanely euthanize the bat to send them for testing. So it's in the best interest of the public and the bats to not handle them barehanded. So usually when we have people call us, we explain If there's no one from the group that we work with very closely, that is a wildlife rescue group available, then we guide them step by step on what to do and how to do it safely.
Climate change, we see that it's impacting wildlife in general, migration patterns, etc. Are we noticing a change in the behavior of the bat population because of climate change?
From a Salthaven perspective, I would say a little bit, yeah. This year, we received bats in as early as October. We don't usually start seeing them until December, but we did get a cold snap, and it stayed cold enough that we couldn't release them. We also find that, especially in southern Ontario, we got a lot of mild winters, which we didn't used to ever have. We used to have nice, cold, snowy winters, and we're finding more often that we're getting rainy Januaries and rainy Februaries, and that can also impact the bats because it's warm enough. If it's warm enough, they may wake up from that torpor and then leave their roost thinking that it's warm enough. And once they get outside, sadly, they realize that it's not warm enough for them to be out and about, and they can often find themselves on the outside of a building. Someone's found them on the ground. So I would relate. I would suspect that is one of the reasons. Is it's climate change. It's definitely warmed up, and the bats are a bit confused as to when is the proper time to wake up.
What can the average person do to help a bat that needs it during the winter months? Is it much like with our songbirds, and we provide food and shelter and access to water? What should the average person be doing, if anything?
Well, during the winter, I don't know if there's a lot that they can do because the bats should be sleeping in a torpor-like state. But definitely in the summer, we often recommend plant native species of plants in your yard and around your house that will attract bugs, that will attract the bats. We also suggest if you can put up bat boxes. It can take a long time for bats to find the bat box and start using it. And we also recommend that if you do find that you have bats in your house and you're concerned that you have a roost, that we do ask that if you're going to exude them, that you make sure that you're doing it at the appropriate time. And for Southern Ontario, that would be August and September.
And in Regina, in Saskatchewan?
It would be around the same. Yeah, we recommend the same thing. And I agree 100% with Megan. During the winter, there's not much to be done. If you find a bat outside, it needs help. It can't stay outside. It's very frigid. And then, yeah, if it's any other time, it depends on the situation, what happened, what's around. So we ask a lot of questions when we get phone calls about there's a bat on the ground. Well, we have to kind of try to understand the situation and what may or may not have happened. If we usually try to set them at the base of a tree and go from there. If it's still there after a little bit and is not moving, then it definitely needs to come in, and we do a triage. We check them and then go from there.
Okay. And then I was reading a National Geographic article not that long ago about bats, and they had some fun facts in there for kids. And one of them was explaining why bats sleep upside down. So why do bats sleep upside down?
In the article, they talk about it for bats being it's kind of an easy escape to get away from predators. One of the ways I look at bats is that they face downwards because they are the only manually powered flying mammal, and they require a downward motion to take flight. Often you see birds that are on the ground and they just, they take off from the ground. They can go up straight, they can go 45-degree angle. Bats don't have a lot of strong little leg muscles, and so if they are on the ground, it can be challenging for them to get up. But when they're up high, they can quickly let go of wherever they're hanging on to, dip down, and then they can go into their flight patterns.
So when they're in torpor, then in your refrigerators, do they sleep hanging upside down?
Yeah, they sure do.
Okay, very cool. And then the other thing in that article that caught my attention was how many times their heart beats when they are flying. Like, can't imagine the heartbeat rate in a human.
Yeah, I believe their heart rate goes to the 1,000 or something like that beats per minute. So they go from that when active, when flying, when hunting, to the hundreds when just chilling. um, and then to down to 10-ish when they're in active torpor. So it's magnificent to know that they can adapt to that high difference.
Yeah, that's incredible. Okay, so let's just wrap this up with a quick, short favorite bat story from both of you, if you have one.
I had a female bat in care. She'd been in care for about a month, and this was at a time where we weren't putting them into torpor. And in Ontario, we are allowed to house bats together once they're vaccinated, and they've kind of gone through a quarantine period. And we know that females really like to be in the company of other females. And so this poor female did not have any cage mates for a full month. And I was really worried that she was going to start having some depression. And finally, after 1 month, we took in another female, a female bat. And once she was quarantined and vaccinated, I placed her in the cage with the first bat. And the way the initial bat greeted her, she literally opened up her wing and kind of let the other bat go under her wing, and she immediately started cleaning her, and they were sniffing each other, and it was just such a very endearing moment that has just stuck with me, because I could see that they were very fast friends. They were always roosting together. Even when we had other bats in the cage, those two were almost inseparable.
Oh, that's a far cry from, the Hollywood version of some bats that are out there, right? Shows that they are very, very, very loving and emotive, and that. And Nat, what's your favorite bat story?
I have to say, Megan, that's so beautiful. I teared up a little bit. That is so beautiful. They're so good. Um, so my favorite is a big brown bat, male. He came in caught by a cat, had a horrible laceration on his back. It was infected. He was thin. He was dehydrated. His fur was matted. He was just in super bad condition, and we all thought he wasn't going to make it. But I said, you know what, we have the resources to help you, so we will try. We'll give you a chance. I could not believe the recovery that bat made. I have pictures of the intake date, and then the mid treatment, and then pre-release, and it's absolutely incredible. He recovered from the lacerations. We did rehydration therapy on him. He was on antibiotics, on pain meds. He would not want to eat on his own. Sometimes they are stubborn and they don't want to. It took a lot to get him back to health, but he finally did. And he was getting feistier and feistier, and he had the worst, best attitude ever. So yeah, so I loved him, and he taught me a lot about their demeanor, and how resilient they are, and the different personalities they can have. It's so unbelievable. So I keep him in my mind every time I get a bat that I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, nope, we're gonna try.
It must be so rewarding to be able to have a patient come in a really poor condition, and then to see them set free once the weather improves. Thank you so much for joining me today, Nat and Megan.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Kathy.
And thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate your support. If you haven't already, feel free to leave a comment and tell us what you learned from this episode. And if you want to learn more about bats, including how to safely get them out of your house if they somehow enter it, check out episode 5 of Wild About Wildlife. I'm your host, Kathy Mueller. Until next time, thank you for helping to keep the wild in wildlife.